In this presentation we will talk about the triggering methods. Now before actually going into the triggering and the different types of triggering available to us, let us first talk about that which part of the sequential circuit we have to trigger. Okay, so if you remember, sequential circuit is nothing but the combinational circuit with the memory. So you are having your combinational circuit here, the input is given to it and the output is generated. Now the state of this circuit is stored in the memory, and you already know that this memory is nothing but the latch or the flip-flops. Okay, I will explain you the difference between latch and flip-flop when we call the memory element as latch and when we call it as flip-flop in the next presentation. So this is the memory, a latch or flip-flop, and a clock pulse is given to it. This clock pulse is the control input. Okay, you already know this, in the last presentation I explained you. Now what we have to trigger in this sequential circuit, we have to trigger this memory element. Okay, the state is stored in this latch or flip-flop is switched. Switched means change from the one state to the other state depending upon the input and the previous state stored in it. It is changed or switched by the change in the control input. This clock pulse, when changes, it will cause the change in the latches or flip-flops. And what will change in the latch or flip-flop? The stored state, whatever the state of this circuit, will be changed depending upon the clock pulse. So we have to trigger this memory element, our latch or flip-flop, and this transition we call as the triggering of the flip-flop. So this is what we have to trigger, and now let's move to the other part of this lecture in which we will talk about the different type of triggering methods available to us. You already know the clock looks something like this: low to high, then low, again high, and then low, and it repeats. The duty cycle for the clock is 50%. Now for the different portion of this clock we can have the triggering of our latches or flip-flop. So I can divide the triggering methods into two types. The first one is your level triggering and the second one is your edge triggering. So in level triggering, what we have actually, in level triggering, whenever the clock remains in high, there will be transition in your latches and flip-flop. Similarly, when it is high here, there will be change or transition in your latches and flip-flop. This we call as the level triggering. Whenever you are having clock as high, the change in the circuit will happen. Now in edge triggering, let's talk about edge triggering. It is of two types. The first one is your positive edge triggering and the second one is your negative edge triggering. So let's make a clock and we'll try to understand what is positive edge triggering and your negative edge triggering. So this is my clock, and I will say that this memory element will trigger when this clock goes from low to high. This is low and this one is high, and at this point the clock is low, and when it goes from low to high, there will be change in the memory element. It will switch from one state to other state. Similarly, again when it is going from low to high, there will be change. Okay, so this is your positive edge triggering. Let's see what happens in the negative edge triggering. In case of negative edge triggering, it's very simple. Once you have done with your positive edge triggering, when the clock is at high and it goes to low, there will be transition in our memory element. Similarly, at this point it is high, and when it goes from high to low, again there will be transition. So these are the triggering methods available to us, and it's important to understand this simple thing before we actually proceed to our flip-flops, because sometimes it creates confusion. So now it's clear for you. So in the next presentation we are going to find out what is the difference between the latch and the flip-flop. So see you in the next one.